Imagine a universe where every species looks at Earth with a mixture of horror and disbelief. They call it a death world, a planet so impossibly hostile that nothing should survive there, let alone thrive. The gravity crushes, the weather kills, the very air corrodes metal. And somehow, humans not only live there but call it home. For centuries, the Galactic Federation has watched humanity with morbid fascination, treating them like exotic curiosities, tough enough to be useful, but too primitive to be taken seriously. Humans serve as bodyguards, heavy laborers, and shock troops, always underestimated, always dismissed as simple brutes from a nightmare world. But what happens when the unthinkable occurs? When an ancient terror awakens in the void between stars, something so powerful that it makes the Federation's greatest warriors flee in panic. When their most advanced technology fails and their strongest champions fall like wheat before the scythe. That's when they discover the truth that will reshape the galaxy forever. Surviving on Earth didn't just make humans tough. It forged them into something the universe has never seen before. Something that doesn't know how to quit, doesn't understand the word surrender, and treats impossible odds as just another Tuesday. The crisis is coming, the Federation is crumbling, and humanity is about to show the galaxy what Deathworlders are really capable of when everything is on the line. This is the story of how Earth's children became the galaxy's salvation. One impossible victory at a time. The transport ship Gentle Current shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its crystalline hull singing with harmonics that would have been beautiful if Captain Zetharara wasn't so focused on the nightmare hanging in the viewport ahead of them. Earth. The death world that haunted the dreams of civilized beings across the galaxy. "By the seven suns," whispered Navigator Crix, his feathered crest flattening against his skull in instinctive fear. The atmospheric readings are off the charts. How does anything survive down there? Zetharara's tentacles rippled with nervous energy as she reviewed the mission briefing for the 100th time. The Galactic Federation Council had been clear. Retrieve the human mercenaries from Earth and transport them to the Kepler Station crisis. Simple enough in theory, terrifying in practice. Humans were useful, certainly, but visiting their homeworld was like voluntarily entering a death trap. The gravity alone should crush most carbon-based life forms, muttered Chief Science Officer Veltar, his usually pristine blue skin now pale with anxiety. And the oxygen concentration? It's practically toxic. How do they breathe that corrosive atmosphere? The ship's artificial intelligence, a sophisticated Zenthari construct, chimed softly. "Captain, we are receiving multiple communication requests from Earth's orbital stations. They appear to be offering docking assistance and... tourism packages? Tourism." Zethara's four eyes widened in disbelief. What kind of insane species would advertise their nightmare world as a vacation destination? "Patch me through to the designated human contact," she ordered, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a human face. Commander Sarah Chen of the Terra Defense Corps smiled warmly at them, apparently completely oblivious to the fact that she was living on a planet that should have killed her ancestors millions of years ago. "Welcome to Earth, Captain Zethara," Sarah said, her voice carrying that strange human quality that seemed simultaneously gentle and absolutely unyielding. "We've been expecting you. I trust your journey through the Sol system wasn't too uncomfortable?" Uncomfortable was an understatement. They barely made it past Jupiter without their shields failing from the radiation. The asteroid belt had been a nightmare of debris that moved with impossible precision, as if the entire system was designed to kill visitors. And don't even mention the solar radiation that would have sterilized any normal world. It was educational, Zethara managed. "We're here to collect the mercenary team requested for the Kepler situation. I trust they're ready for immediate departure?" Sarah's smile shifted, taking on an edge that made every instinct in Zethara's body scream warnings. "Of course. Though I should mention, Captain, we've been monitoring the situation at Kepler Station. It sounds serious." Serious was putting it mildly. 3 Federation fleets had already been destroyed by whatever was attacking the outer colonies. Entire star systems had gone dark. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were calling it the worst crisis in Federation history. "That's why we need your people," Zethara said. "Human mercenaries have proven effective in high-stress combat situations." "High stress," Sarah repeated, and something in her tone made Zethara's translator struggle with the nuances. "Captain, with respect, you have no idea what you're walking into out there. My people have been analyzing the reports from Kepler. This isn't just another conflict." Navigator Crix leaned forward, his voice squeaking with nervousness. "What do you mean?" Sarah's expression grew serious, and for the first time since the communication had begun, she looked genuinely concerned. "The enemy you're facing, we've seen their weapon signatures before. In our history, they're using technology based on principles that most Federation species gave up millions of years ago because they considered it too dangerous." "Impossible," Velta interjected. "Our records show no previous contact with this enemy force." "Your records," Sarah said quietly, "don't go back far enough." An uncomfortable silence fell over the bridge. Finally, Zithara cleared her throat. "Regardless, we have our orders." "Are the mercenaries ready?" "They're ready," Sarah confirmed. "But, Captain, there's something you should understand about the team you're taking. These aren't just mercenaries, they're volunteers. Every single one of them chose to come on this mission after reading the full reports from Kepler. That made no sense. Why would anyone volunteer for what was essentially a suicide mission?" "I don't understand," Zethara admitted. Sarah's smile returned, but now it carried something that made the captain's blood run cold with its intensity. "That's the thing about humans, Captain. We have a saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. When something threatens innocent lives, we don't ask about the odds. We ask what needs to be done." The transport bay doors of the orbital station opened, and a small shuttle emerged, heading toward the gentle current. Through the viewport, Zethara could see figures moving inside the shuttle, and even at this distance, there was something about their movements that was different from any other species she'd encountered. Purposeful, predatory, utterly without fear. "How many humans are we transporting?" she asked. 12, Sarah replied. "I know it doesn't sound like many compared to the Federation's usual military deployments, but trust me, Captain. When you see what 12 humans can accomplish when they're properly motivated, you'll understand why we've survived on this death world for as long as we have." The shuttle docked with a gentle thump, and Zethara felt her ship's artificial gravity adjust to compensate for the additional mass. Moments later, her security chief, a formidable Kraxan warrior named Thek, contacted the bridge. "Captain." Thek's voice was strangely subdued. "The humans have boarded. They're different from the other humans I've encountered." "Different how?" "They move like they're constantly expecting combat. And their equipment. Captain, I've never seen weapons like these. The energy signatures are completely unfamiliar." Sarah seemed to hear the conversation through the open comm channel. "That would be our Special Forces gear. We've had to get creative over the years living on a world that's constantly trying to kill us. You develop certain innovations." The elevator to the bridge opened, and Sarah stepped out, having apparently transported directly from the orbital station. Up close, she was even more intimidating than she had appeared on the screen. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and her eyes held the kind of calm intensity that spoke of someone who had seen the worst the universe could offer and was still standing. "Captain Zethara," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I wanted to personally thank you for taking this mission. Not many Federation captains would risk coming to Earth, even for something this important." Zethara tentatively reached out with one tentacle to shake Sarah's hand, noting the surprising strength in the human's grip. "It's our duty to the Federation." "No," Sarah said quietly. "It's more than that. You're risking your ship and crew to transport my people into danger. That makes you better than most of the Federation officials who sent you." Before Zethara could ask what she meant by that, the bridge elevator opened again, and the human team began filing onto the bridge. The captain's first thought was that they looked surprisingly normal. 2 arms, 2 legs, the standard bipedal configuration. But as she watched them move, she began to understand what Thek had meant. They moved like Earth's gravity meant nothing to them. Where her crew members carefully planned each step to conserve energy against the artificial gravity, the humans flowed through the space as if they were born to it. Their eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, noting exits, potential threats, resources. It was the behavior of creatures who had evolved on a world where a moment's inattention meant death. The leader of the group stepped forward, a tall male with graying hair and scars that told stories of battles fought and survived. "Captain, I'm Colonel Marcus Webb, Terra Special Forces. My team and I appreciate the transport." "Colonel," Zethara nodded, "I trust your people understand the gravity of the situation at Kepler." Webb's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't think anyone understands the gravity of this situation. But my people have a saying, embrace the suck and drive on. We'll figure it out when we get there." The reports indicate that 3 Federation fleets have already been destroyed, Navigator Crix said nervously. Whatever's out there, it's unlike anything the galaxy has seen before. Actually, said one of the other humans, a woman with cybernetic enhancements covering half her face, it's very much like something the galaxy has seen before. It's just that most species tried very hard to forget about it. Webb shot her a warning look, but she continued. My name's Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Park, Federation Intelligence Division. I've been studying the attack patterns from Kepler, and I can tell you with certainty that we're dealing with something that should have stayed buried in the ancient history files. Beltar leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. What do you mean? Park activated a holographic display from her wrist unit, showing tactical readings from the Kepler attacks. The enemy is using quantum disruption weapons. Most civilized species abandoned that technology millions of years ago because it was considered too unstable and dangerous. But someone's perfected it. Impossible, Velta breathed. Quantum disruption technology would require computational power beyond anything the Federation has ever developed. Beyond anything the current Federation has developed, Park corrected. But there are species in this galaxy that are older than the Federation, much older. And some of them never forgot the old ways. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. If Park was right, they weren't just dealing with a new enemy. They were facing something that had been around since before most current civilizations had even evolved. That's why you volunteered, Zethara said, suddenly understanding. You knew what you were facing. Webb nodded grimly. Earth's been dealing with impossible odds for its entire history, Captain. We've learned to adapt. When the Federation sent out the call for help, we knew we were probably the only ones crazy enough to say yes. But 12 people against something that destroyed 3 fleets? Sarah, who had been quietly observing the conversation, stepped forward. Captain, you're thinking about this wrong. You're thinking in terms of traditional military engagement, fleets, firepower, conventional tactics. That's exactly why those 3 fleets failed. She gestured to Webb's team. These people come from a world where the weather can kill you, where the local wildlife includes creatures that hunt in packs and others that can take down prey 100 times their size. They've learned to think differently about combat, about survival, about what it means to win against impossible odds. As if to illustrate her point, one of the younger team members, barely old enough to be called an adult by human standards, was casually field stripping and reassembling what looked like a weapon while carrying on a conversation with a teammate. The speed and precision of his movements were almost hypnotic, and Zethara realized she was watching someone who had been handling deadly instruments since childhood. How long until we reach Kepler Station? Webb asked. 4 standard days at maximum hyperspace velocity, Zethara replied. Good. That gives us time to review the tactical data and plan our approach. Webb turned to his team. All right, people, you know the drill. Set up in the cargo bay, establish a planning center, and start going through every piece of information we have about this enemy. As the humans filed off the bridge, Sarah lingered behind. Captain, there's something else you should know. The Federation Council didn't just request human mercenaries. They specifically requested Terra Special Forces. What's the difference? Sarah's smile turned cold. Mercenaries fight for money. Terra Special Forces fights for something much more dangerous, principle. When we say we're going to stop this enemy, we mean it, no matter what the cost. After Sarah left, the bridge crew sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Navigator Crix spoke up. Captain, what have we gotten ourselves into? Zethara stared out at the blue and green world below them, trying to imagine what kind of environment could produce beings like the ones now aboard her ship. Earth hung in space like a beautiful jewel, but she knew that beneath that deceptive beauty lay a world of unimaginable danger and violence. I'm not sure, she admitted, but I'm beginning to think that whatever's waiting for us at Kepler Station is about to discover why the rest of the galaxy calls Earth a death world. The gentle current turned away from Earth and began its acceleration toward hyperspace. In the cargo bay, 12 humans from the deadliest world in the galaxy prepared for war against an enemy that had already proven it could destroy anything the Federation could throw at it. They were outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1. The odds were impossible. The enemy was ancient and powerful beyond imagination. For humans, it was just another Tuesday. The hyperspace journey to Kepler Station should have been routine. 4 days of peaceful travel through the dimensional fold that connected distant points in space, with nothing to do but wait and prepare. For most Federation crews, it would have meant meditation, rest, and careful conservation of energy for the trials ahead. The humans had turned the cargo bay into something that resembled a cross between a military command center and a gladiatorial training ground. Captain Zethara watched through the internal monitors as Colonel Webb's team prepared for whatever they would face at Kepler Station. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about intelligent behavior. Where any civilized species would be conserving strength, the humans were pushing their bodies to what seemed like dangerous limits. Two of them were engaged in what could only be described as ritualized combat, moving with lethal precision as they practiced techniques that were clearly designed to kill quickly and efficiently. Another was methodically cleaning weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum of ancient warfare rather than a modern military arsenal. Captain, Science Officer Veltar's voice held a note of fascination mixed with horror. I've been monitoring the human vital signs. Their training regimen should have incapacitated them by now, but their stress indicators show they're barely exerted. Zetharea rippled her tentacles thoughtfully. Their homeworld environment must have required extreme physical conditioning just for basic survival. It's more than that, Veltar continued, his voice dropping to an awed whisper. I've been analyzing their muscle density and bone structure. Captain, these beings are built like living weapons. Their skeletal system could withstand impacts that would shatter most species, and their musculature is so dense it's almost incomprehensible. Navigator Crix looked up from his calculations with obvious nervousness. Captain, I've been reviewing the tactical data from Kepler Station. The destruction patterns are disturbing. Whatever attacked those Federation fleets didn't just destroy them. It seemed to be studying them, learning from each engagement. Before Zethara could respond, the bridge elevator opened, and Colonel Webb stepped out, followed by Lieutenant Colonel Park. The human commander moved with the same predatory grace she'd noticed before, but now there was something else in his demeanor, a cold intensity that made her instinctively want to retreat. Captain, Webb said without preamble, we need to talk about the tactical situation at Kepler Station. Of course, Colonel. What can I tell you? Webb activated a portable holographic projector, filling the bridge with a three-dimensional representation of the Kepler system. Red markers indicated the locations where Federation fleets had been destroyed, creating a pattern that made Zethara's blood run cold. The enemy isn't random in their attacks, Webb explained, his finger tracing the destruction pattern. They're probing, testing response times, weapons capabilities, tactical doctrines. Each fleet that engaged them lasted a little longer than the last, but only because they learned from watching the previous engagements. Park stepped forward, her cybernetic enhancements glowing softly as she interfaced with the holographic display. We've identified the enemy's primary weapons platform. It's a ship design that predates the current galactic civilization by at least 50,000 years. The quantum disruption technology they're using isn't just advanced, it's from a completely different technological philosophy. What do you mean? Veltar asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. Modern Federation technology is based on harmony and cooperation with natural forces, Park explained. Ships that work with space-time rather than against it. Weapons that channel energy rather than forcing it. It's elegant and efficient. But Zethara sensed there was more to this explanation. Webb's expression grew grim. But this enemy's technology is based on domination and conquest of natural forces. They don't work with the universe. They beat it into submission. Their weapons don't channel energy. They tear holes in reality itself and use the resulting chaos as a weapon.
The bridge fell silent as the implication sank in.
They were facing an enemy whose very technology was antithetical to everything the Federation represented. How do we fight something like that? Navigator Crix whispered. Webb's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. We do what humans have always done when facing impossible odds. We adapt, we improvise. We overcome. Colonel, Zethara said carefully, I appreciate human confidence, but the reports from Kepler indicate that conventional weapons are completely ineffective against this enemy. How can 12 people succeed where 3 fleets failed? Park answered before Webb could speak. Because we're not going to fight them conventionally, Captain. We're going to fight them the way Earth taught us to fight. I don't understand. Webb leaned back against the navigation console, and Zethara noticed that even in this casual position, he remained alert and ready for immediate action. It was as if relaxation was a concept that didn't exist in the human vocabulary. Captain, let me tell you a story about Earth. A few thousand years ago, our ancestors faced an enemy that was technologically superior in every way. Better weapons, better armor, better tactics. They should have been wiped out in the first engagement. What happened? They won, Webb said simply. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through superior adaptability. They studied their enemy, learned their weaknesses, and then exploited those weaknesses in ways the enemy never expected. Park activated another holographic display, this one showing detailed schematics of the enemy ships from the Kepler engagements. Every piece of technology has weaknesses, Captain. Even quantum disruption weapons. The more powerful the technology, the more complex its systems, and the more potential failure points it has. Zathara studied the schematics, noting the incredible complexity of the enemy vessels. But how do you plan to exploit these weaknesses? Your weapons are centuries behind theirs. Then, our weapons might be primitive by their standards, Webb acknowledged. But sometimes primitive weapons have advantages that advanced technology can't match. They're unpredictable. They're simple. And most importantly, there's something the enemy hasn't encountered in their recent experience. The ship's artificial intelligence chimed softly. Captain, we are approaching the Kepler system. You may want to review the current tactical situation. The main screen activated, showing long-range sensor data from the Kepler system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge freeze in horror. Where Kepler Station should have been, there was only debris and the twisted remains of what had once been one of the Federation's most advanced research facilities. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the ship hanging in space near the debris field like a predator surveying its kill. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of any Federation vessel, and its design was like nothing in any current database. Angular, aggressive, built for war rather than exploration or diplomacy. By the Seven Suns, breathed Navigator Crix. It's still there. Of course it's still there, Park said calmly. It's waiting for the next Federation fleet to arrive so it can study their tactics and add their technological distinctiveness to its own understanding. That's what it's been doing with every engagement. Webb studied the sensor readings with the same intensity a predator might study potential prey. How long do we have before it detects us? At current distance and with our stealth systems active, approximately 6 hours, Zathara replied. Good. That gives us time to prepare. Webb turned to address the bridge crew. Captain, I need you to understand something. The plan my team has developed isn't going to follow any standard military protocol you're familiar with. What kind of plan? The kind that gets results when conventional thinking fails. Webb activated his personal communicator. Team, prepare for implementation of Operation Deathworld. We go in 4 hours. As Webb and Park left the bridge, Zathara found herself staring at the enemy ship on the main screen. It was beautiful in its terrible way. A perfect fusion of advanced technology and deadly intent. Against something like that, what could 12 humans possibly accomplish? In the cargo bay, the humans were making final preparations for what appeared to be a completely insane plan. Instead of preparing for a direct assault, they were modifying their equipment in ways that made no tactical sense. Weapons were being stripped down to their most basic components. Armor was being discarded in favor of lightweight gear that provided minimal protection. Captain, Veltar's voice held a note of confused fascination. The humans appear to be deliberately reducing their technological advantages. Their actions are illogical. Zathara watched as the youngest member of the human team, a specialist named Rodriguez, finished assembling what looked like an ancient explosive device using components that belonged in a chemistry laboratory rather than a weapons cache. Unless, she said slowly, they understand something about this enemy that we don't. Captain, incoming transmission from Kepler Station's emergency beacon. Priority Alpha. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the ravaged face of Admiral Kethvar, one of the Federation's most experienced military commanders. His usual composed demeanor was completely shattered, replaced by something that looked disturbingly like terror. This is Admiral Kethvar to any Federation vessel receiving this transmission. Do not approach Kepler Station. Repeat, do not approach. The enemy has capabilities beyond anything in our experience. 3 fleets destroyed, over 40,000 casualties, and we haven't even scratched their hull plating. The transmission flickered with static, and when it cleared, Kethvar's expression had grown even more desperate. The enemy is learning from each engagement. Their weapons are adapting to our defensive systems in real time. Whatever you do, don't engage them with conventional tactics. They'll turn your own technology against you. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. 40,000 casualties, whispered Navigator Crix. And we're taking 12 humans against whatever did that? Before anyone could answer, Colonel Webb's voice came over the internal communication system. All hands, this is Colonel Webb. In 3 hours, we'll be implementing Operation Deathworld. To our Federation allies, I want you to understand that what you're about to see will contradict everything you've been taught about civilized warfare. But sometimes, when civilization fails, you need to remember what it was like before civilization existed. Zethara stared out at the enemy ship, trying to imagine what kind of plan could possibly succeed against such overwhelming odds. In her centuries of space travel, she'd learned to trust in advanced technology, superior firepower, and coordinated fleet actions. The humans were about to abandon all of those advantages. They were about to fight like the primitive Deathworlders they were. And somehow, watching them prepare, Zethara began to think that might be exactly what this ancient enemy wasn't prepared to face. The countdown to Operation Deathworld continued, and in the cargo bay, 12 humans from the deadliest planet in the galaxy made final preparations to do what 3 Federation fleets couldn't accomplish. They were going to remind the universe why Earth was called a death world, and why the species that survived there were the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. The enemy ship waited in the debris field, confident in its technological superiority and ancient knowledge. It was about to learn that some things were older than technology and far more dangerous than ancient knowledge. It was about to learn what happened when you threatened something a human decided to protect. Operation Deathworld began not with the thunder of weapons or the coordinated assault of a military force, but with what appeared to be complete tactical insanity. Captain Zethara watched in growing horror and fascination as Colonel Webb's team implemented the most unconventional military strategy she had ever witnessed. Instead of approaching the enemy vessel with the gentle current, they had loaded themselves into the ship's escape pods and launched directly toward the massive enemy ship. "Colonel," she transmitted over the emergency frequency. "Your pods have no weapon systems, no shields, and no stealth capabilities. The enemy will detect you within minutes." Webb's voice came back calm and steady, as if he was discussing the weather rather than flying defensively naked toward a ship that had destroyed 3 Federation fleets. "That's the point, Captain. They're expecting either a direct assault by a military vessel or another attempt at long-range engagement. They're not expecting 12 primitives in escape pods." Navigator Crix was frantically working his controls, trying to track the human pods as they dispersed across multiple approach vectors. "Captain, their flight patterns make no sense. They're not following any recognized tactical formation, and they're not using the pod's minimal propulsion systems efficiently." "They're not trying to be efficient," Science Officer Veltar said, studying the sensor readings with growing amazement. "They're trying to look like debris. Look at their trajectories. They're matching the orbital patterns of the destroyed Federation ships." Close quote. The 12 pods were moving through space like pieces of wreckage caught in the gravitational influences of the system's primary star and planets. To casual observation, they would look like nothing more than the detritus of previous battles. Lieutenant Colonel Park's voice crackled over the communications array. "Captain, we're about to go dark to avoid detection. Whatever happens next, don't intervene unless we specifically request assistance. This only works if the enemy thinks they're dealing with natural phenomena." The communications cut off, leaving the bridge of the gentle current in tense silence. Zethara found herself staring at the tactical display, trying to understand how 12 humans in defenseless pods could possibly threaten a ship that had proven immune to the Federation's most advanced weapons. "Captain," the ship's artificial intelligence announced, "the enemy vessel is beginning to move. They appear to be investigating the debris field from the destroyed Federation ships." On the main screen, the massive enemy ship began a slow, methodical sweep through the wreckage, its sensors probing every piece of metal and composite material. It was clearly searching for something: technology to analyze, survivors to interrogate, or perhaps just confirming the total destruction of its enemies. Veltar's instruments began registering strange readings. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the enemy vessel. They appear to be using some form of quantum resonance scanning. They're not just looking at the debris, they're analyzing it at the molecular level." That explained how they had been adapting so quickly to Federation technology. They weren't just observing the weapons and defenses used against them. They were studying the fundamental principles behind the technology and then developing countermeasures. How were the humans going to avoid that kind of detailed scanning?
Navigator Crix wondered aloud.
As if in answer to his question, the tactical display showed the first human pod suddenly venting atmosphere and beginning to tumble end over end. A moment later, a second pod began showing similar signs of catastrophic failure. "No," Zethara whispered, her tentacles writhing in distress. "They're dying out there." But Veltar was studying his readings more carefully, and his expression showed confusion rather than grief. "Captain, the energy signatures from those pods, They don't match what I would expect from actual life support failure. A third pod began tumbling, then a fourth. Within minutes, all 12 pods were showing signs of critical system failure, drifting like dead hulks through the debris field. The enemy ship's sensors swept over them dismissively and moved on. They're faking it, Navigator Crix breathed. Somehow they're simulating complete system failure to avoid detection. For 30 tense minutes, the enemy ship continued its methodical search through the debris field, while the human pods drifted silently among the wreckage. Then, without warning, everything changed. The first sign something was wrong came when the enemy ship's quantum resonance scanners suddenly went offline. The massive vessel shuddered as if it had been struck by an invisible force, and alarm indicators began flashing across its hull. "What just happened?" Zethara demanded. Beltar was frantically trying to make sense of his sensor readings. "I don't know. Something inside the enemy ship just exploded, but I'm not reading any weapons discharge from the human pods." A second explosion rocked the enemy vessel, this one larger than the first. Emergency lights began flashing along the alien ship's hull, and it began to change course, moving away from the debris field. "Captain," the ship's artificial intelligence announced, "I'm receiving a tight beam transmission from Colonel Webb." Webb's voice came through clearly, though he was obviously in some kind of combat situation. The sound of energy weapons and shouting could be heard in the background. "Captain, we're inside the enemy ship." "So far, the plan is working, but we need you to be ready to move fast when I give the signal." "Inside the ship?" Zethara's voice rose to a near shriek. "How did you get inside the ship?" "Turns out ancient technology has the same weakness as modern technology," Webb replied, ducking as an energy blast sizzled past him. "When you're looking for sophisticated threats, you sometimes miss the simple ones." The truth began to dawn on Zethara as she watched the human pods, which were no longer drifting helplessly, but were instead attached to various points along the enemy vessel's hull. They hadn't been hiding in the debris field, they'd been using it as camouflage to get close enough to board the enemy ship. The escape pods were never meant to protect them during the approach, she realized. They were delivery vehicles. Another explosion rocked the enemy ship, and this time Veltar was able to track its source. "Captain, that blast originated from the enemy's primary quantum processing center. The humans are systematically targeting their most critical systems." Park's voice joined the communication. "Captain, we've identified the enemy's primary weakness. Their quantum disruption technology requires massive computational power to maintain stability. They've basically turned their entire ship into one giant quantum computer." "What does that mean?" Navigator Crix asked. Webb answered, his voice strained from combat. "It means they're vulnerable to something no advanced civilization would ever think to use against them. Good old-fashioned sabotage." As if to illustrate his point, another series of explosions rippled through the enemy vessel. But these weren't the clean, precise detonations of advanced weapons. These were dirty, chaotic blasts that seemed designed to cause maximum system disruption rather than clean destruction. Veltar was studying the explosions with scientific fascination. "Captain, those aren't military explosives. They appear to be improvised devices using basic chemical reactions. The humans are using primitive technology to disrupt quantum systems." It was brilliant in its simplicity. The enemy's quantum computers were so sophisticated that they required perfect environmental conditions to function. Introduce a little chaos, some smoke, some heat, some electromagnetic interference, and the entire system would begin to destabilize. The enemy ship was beginning to show serious signs of distress. Its perfect angular lines were now marred by blast damage, and its movement through space was becoming erratic as critical systems failed. "Colonel," Zethara transmitted, "whatever you're doing, it's working. The enemy ship is losing power." "We're not done yet," Webb replied. "We still need to make sure they can't repair the damage and come after another Federation colony." "Rodriguez, are you in position?" A young voice answered, barely audible over the sound of combat. "In position, sir." "Charges set on the primary quantum matrix." "What charges?" Zethara asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. Park's voice came through clearly. "Captain, you might want to move your ship to a safe distance. What we're about to do is going to be dramatic." The enemy vessel was now clearly in distress, its weapons systems offline and its propulsion erratic, but it was still a massive ship, with thousands of crew members and technology that could be repaired given time. "All human personnel, this is Colonel Webb. Operation Deathworld is entering final phase. Prepare for immediate extraction."
Extraction. Navigator Crix looked confused.
"How are they going to get off that ship?" The answer came in the form of 12 small objects suddenly ejecting from various points along the enemy vessel's hull. At first, Zetharara thought they were escape pods again. But these objects were much smaller and moving much faster. Emergency beacon suits, Veltar identified. They're using personal survival gear as extraction vehicles. The humans had basically strapped themselves to emergency beacons and launched themselves into space, trusting in their primitive technology and their own physical resilience to survive the journey back to the gentle current. Captain, Webb's voice came through his suit's emergency transmitter. You have approximately 30 seconds to get as far from that ship as possible before the quantum matrix destabilizes. Zethara didn't waste time asking for explanations. Maximum acceleration now.
The gentle current's engines engaged at full power, pushing the ship away from the enemy vessel at dangerous speeds.
Through the rear sensors, they watched as the humans in their makeshift escape suits were also racing away from the ship, using emergency propulsion systems that were never meant for such maneuvers. The countdown reached 0, and the enemy ship simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. The quantum disruption that had made their weapons so powerful had been turned against their own ship. The entire vessel collapsed into a singularity that lasted for exactly 0.003 seconds before dissipating, leaving nothing behind but a faint gravitational echo and a handful of exotic particles. In the aftermath, 12 humans in emergency beacon suits were floating through space, waiting for pickup, and apparently completely unconcerned about what they had just accomplished. Gentle current, Webb transmitted calmly. This is Colonel Webb requesting immediate extraction. Also, you might want to contact the Federation Council. Tell them the immediate threat to Kepler Station has been neutralized. As the ship's recovery systems began pulling the humans aboard, Zetharara tried to process what she had just witnessed. 12 primitive warriors from a death world had accomplished what 3 Federation fleets couldn't, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through tactics so unconventional that an advanced enemy couldn't predict or counter them. Captain, Veltar said quietly, I'm beginning to understand why Earth is classified as a death world. It's not just the environmental hazards, it's what those hazards created. Navigator Crix was still staring at the empty space where the enemy ship had been. 40,000 casualties in 3 fleet actions, and they stopped it with 12 people and improvised explosives. When the humans were finally back aboard the gentle current, they looked exactly like what they were. Soldiers who had just completed a difficult but routine mission. No celebration, no bragging about their impossible victory, just professional satisfaction at a job well done. Colonel Webb appeared on the bridge, his armor scorched but his expression calm. Captain, we'll need to transmit a full report to the Federation Council, but the immediate crisis is over. Colonel, Zethara said, her voice filled with awe. What you accomplished out there. How did you know it would work? Webb's smile was tired but genuine. Captain, when you come from a world that's been trying to kill you since the day you were born, you learn that every enemy has weaknesses. Even the ones that seem impossible to defeat. But the quantum technology, the advanced systems, were exactly what made them vulnerable.
Park interjected, joining the conversation.
The more complex a system becomes, the more ways it can fail. We just had to find the right pressure points and apply force in ways they weren't expecting. As the gentle current began its journey back to Federation space, Zethara found herself looking at the humans with new understanding. They weren't just tough because of their world's harsh environment. They were dangerous because that environment had taught them to think in ways that no civilized species would ever consider. They had turned warfare into an art form, and their canvas was the impossible. The galaxy was about to learn that when you back a human into a corner, when you threaten what they've decided to protect, they don't just fight back. They find a way to win, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. The journey back to Federation space should have been a triumphant return. They had accomplished what 3 Federation fleets couldn't, neutralized a threat that had been paralyzing the outer colonies, and proven that the impossible was just another word for something humans hadn't tried yet. Instead, Captain Zethara found herself dealing with the most disturbing series of revelations in her long career. It started with Lieutenant Colonel Park's post-mission report. Instead of celebrating their victory, the human intelligence officer had spent the entire journey analyzing the data they'd recovered from the enemy ship during those critical minutes before its destruction. Captain, Park said as she entered the bridge, her cybernetic enhancements glowing with the intensity of someone who had been processing vast amounts of information without rest. We need to talk. What we found on that ship, it changes everything. Zethara gestured for Park to continue, though something in the human's tone made her tentacles curl with anxiety. The enemy vessel wasn't just advanced technology from an ancient civilization, Park explained. activating a holographic display that showed the internal structure of the destroyed ship. It was a reconnaissance probe, a scout ship sent ahead of something much larger. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Navigator Crix's feathers flattened against his skull in terror. A scout ship? You mean there are more of them? Many more, Park confirmed grimly. According to the data we recovered, that ship was part of an advance force numbering in the thousands. And behind them, she paused, checking her readings again, as if hoping they would somehow be different. Behind them is something called the Convergence Fleet. Science Officer Veltar leaned forward, his usual scientific curiosity overwhelmed by growing dread. How large is this Convergence Fleet? Park's expression grew even more grim. Conservative estimate? 10 million ships. Possibly more. The bridge fell into stunned silence. 10 million ships represented military power beyond anything the current galaxy had ever seen. The entire Federation Navy numbered fewer than 50,000 vessels. But that's not the worst part, Park continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The worst part is that we know who they are. The enemy isn't some unknown alien race from outside the galaxy. They're us. What do you mean? Zethara asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. Park activated another display, showing genetic and technological analysis from the enemy ship. The crew of that vessel were descendants of species currently living in Federation space. The evolved variants of Xanthari, Kraxan, Velfi, and dozens of other races. They're what our species become in another timeline, another dimension, where evolution took a different path. Colonel Webb joined the conversation, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of strain. The technology we encountered, the quantum disruption weapons, they're not alien inventions. They're developments of current Federation science taken to their logical extreme and stripped of all ethical constraints. Veltar's blue skin had gone almost white. You're saying that the enemy is us? Some alternate version of galactic civilization? A version where cooperation gave way to conquest, where scientific advancement became focused entirely on domination and control, Park confirmed. The quantum technology they're using isn't just advanced, it's based on the complete subjugation of reality itself to their will. The ship's artificial intelligence chimed softly. Captain, incoming priority transmission from Federation Central Command. The main screen activated, showing the familiar features of Admiral Kethvar, though he looked like he had aged years in the few days since his last transmission. Behind him, the emergency command center of Federation headquarters buzzed with frantic activity. Captain Zethara, Kethvar began without preamble. I've received your preliminary report on the Kepler incident. While we're grateful for the successful neutralization of the enemy vessel, I'm afraid the situation has deteriorated significantly. A tactical display appeared behind the Admiral, showing star systems throughout Federation space. Nearly a dozen were now marked with red indicators. 6 more systems have gone dark since the Kepler engagement, Kethvar continued. We're receiving distress signals from across the outer rim. Whatever that ship at Kepler was, it was apparently one of many. Webb stepped forward. Admiral, we recovered intelligence from the enemy vessel before its destruction. The threat is significantly larger than our initial estimates. How much larger, Colonel? Webb exchanged glances with Park before answering. Admiral, we're not dealing with a single enemy fleet. We're facing an interdimensional invasion by alternate versions of our own species, armed with technology that represents the weaponization of quantum physics itself. The silence that followed stretched for long, uncomfortable seconds. Finally, Admiral Kethvar spoke, his voice carefully controlled. Colonel, are you telling me that the enemy is us? A version of us that chose a different evolutionary path? Park interjected. One where might became the only right, where scientific advancement was focused entirely on dominance rather than exploration. Admiral Kethvar closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, Zethara could see the weight of command pressing down on him. How do we fight an enemy that knows all of our tactics, all of our technology, all of our weaknesses? The same way we fought the scout ship, Webb replied. We do things they won't expect. Their advantage comes from superior technology and knowledge of our conventional methods. But they have the same weakness as the scout ship. They've become dependent on their technological superiority. 12 humans against 1 ship is very different from 12 humans against 10 million ships, Colonel. Webb's smile held no humor, only the cold calculation of a professional warrior. Which is why we're not going to fight 10 million ships, Admiral. We're going to find their command structure and cut the head off the snake. Park activated her holographic display again, showing the organizational structure they discovered on the enemy vessel. The Convergence fleet operates under absolute hierarchical control. Every ship, every decision, every action flows from a central command structure. Remove that structure, and the entire fleet becomes paralyzed. And how exactly do you propose to locate and destroy this command structure? Admiral Kethvar asked. We don't destroy it, Webb said quietly. We turn it against itself. Navigator Crix was frantically working his controls, his feathers standing on end with stress. Captain, he reported, his voice high with panic. We have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Energy signatures match the vessel we destroyed at Kepler. The main screen showed space around their position, and what Zethara saw made her heart stop. Dozens of ships, each identical to the one they destroyed at Kepler, were emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation around the gentle current. Convergence Fleet Advanced Scouts, Park identified grimly. They must have tracked us from Kepler. Evasive maneuvers, Zethara ordered. But even as she spoke, she knew it was hopeless. The enemy ships were moving to surround them with mechanical precision. Captain, Webb said calmly, I need you to trust me. Do not engage the enemy vessels. Do not raise shields. Do not make any threatening moves. Colonel, they're going to destroy us. No, they're not, Webb replied with the certainty of someone stating a natural law. They're going to try to capture us. The Convergence operates on the principle of assimilation. They don't destroy useful resources. They convert them to their own use. As if to confirm Webb's prediction, a transmission came through from the lead enemy vessel. The figure that appeared on screen was humanoid, but wrong in subtle ways that made Zethara's skin crawl. The proportions were slightly off, the movements too precise, the eyes holding an intelligence that was both familiar and utterly alien. Federation vessel, the enemy commander spoke in a voice that carried harmonics of multiple species. You will stand down and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in assimilation rather than conversion. You have 30 seconds to comply. Webb stepped in front of the screen, his posture relaxed and non-threatening. This is Colonel Webb, Terra Special Forces. I formally request parley under the Convention of Armed Conflict. The enemy commander's expression shifted, showing what might have been surprise. Terra Special Forces. We have analyzed your species' military capacity. You represent less than 0.001% of Federation military strength. Why would your surrender have any significance? Webb's smile was razor-sharp. 'Cause I'm not surrendering. I'm offering you a deal. Humans do not possess anything the Convergence requires. I think we do, Webb replied calmly. We possess something your people gave up long ago in their pursuit of technological dominance. We possess the ability to adapt, to innovate, to find solutions to impossible problems. The enemy commander was silent for several seconds, and Zethara realized it was consulting with higher authorities through some form of quantum communication. You intrigue us, Colonel Webb. What do you propose? Single combat, Webb said simply. Your best warrior against mine. Winner takes all. If your champion wins, we surrender unconditionally. If our champion wins, you withdraw from this system and report to your superiors that humanity is not to be underestimated. Does acceptable, the enemy commander replied without hesitation. Your champion against our apex warrior. Combat will take place aboard our vessel to ensure no deception. As the transmission cut off, the bridge crew stared at Webb in horror. Colonel, Zethara whispered, what have you done? You can't seriously think one human can defeat their most advanced warrior. Webb's expression was calm, almost peaceful. Captain, sometimes the only way to win an unwinnable war is to change the rules of engagement. The Convergence operates on the principle of technological superiority. They've forgotten that technology is just a tool. But their champion will be enhanced, augmented, probably more machine than organic. Probably, Webb agreed. Which means it will think like a machine, predictable, limited by its programming. Lieutenant Colonel Park was already preparing equipment for what appeared to be a combat deployment. Colonel, are you sure about this?
No, Webb admitted.
But being sure is a luxury we can't afford. The Convergence fleet is coming whether we fight or not. At least this way, we might learn something useful about their capabilities. As a shuttle from the enemy vessel approached to transport Webb to what was almost certainly his death, Zethara found herself wondering how a species could produce individuals willing to sacrifice themselves so readily for abstract principles. Colonel, she said as he prepared to leave, why are you doing this? Even if you somehow win, it's only one ship. There are thousands more out there. Webb paused at the door, his hand resting on a weapon that looked primitive compared to what he would face aboard the enemy vessel. Captain, my species has a saying. It's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. Maybe I can't stop the Convergence fleet, but I can light a candle. As Webb left for what was probably a suicide mission, the bridge crew watched the enemy ships maintain their perfect formation around the gentle current. Soon, they would know whether human determination was enough to overcome technological superiority. They would know whether the species from the Deathworld could find a way to win even when victory seemed impossible. The single combat that would determine the fate of the Federation was about to begin, and the most dangerous predator from the most dangerous world in the galaxy was going to remind the universe why humans were the one species that thrived on impossible odds. The combat arena aboard the Convergence vessel was a perfect representation of their civilization's philosophy: sterile, efficient, and designed to eliminate any factor except pure technological superiority. The chamber was a sphere of polished metal suspended in the ship's core, with no gravity, no atmosphere, and no environmental factors that might give one combatant an advantage over another. Colonel Webb stood in his simple combat armor, breathing through a basic life support system that looked primitive compared to the crystalline perfection surrounding him. Across from him, the Apex Warrior represented everything the Convergence had achieved through their pursuit of technological dominance. The enemy champion was barely recognizable as having once been organic. Its form was a seamless fusion of multiple species' best attributes, enhanced and amplified through quantum engineering until it represented the theoretical pinnacle of evolved combat capability. Reflexes enhanced beyond biological limits, strength that could crush steel, sensors that could track a target's heartbeat from across the arena. Captain Zethara watched through the viewing portal as hundreds of Convergence warriors filled the observation galleries. This wasn't just a single combat, it was a demonstration, a way for the Convergence to prove their superiority to themselves and to their enemies. "The human doesn't stand a chance," whispered Navigator Crix, his feathers trembling with nervous energy. "Look at that thing. It's more a weapon than warrior." Science Officer Veltar was analyzing the readings from the arena with growing amazement and horror. "Captain, the Apex Warrior's capabilities are beyond anything in our databases. Reaction time measured in microseconds, structural integrity that could withstand a direct hit from ship-class weapons, combat algorithms that can predict and counter thousands of different attack patterns simultaneously." In the arena, the combatants faced each other as the Convergence commander's voice echoed through the chamber. "Combat will continue until one participant surrenders, becomes incapacitated, or dies. There are no other rules. Begin." The Apex Warrior moved with mechanical precision, covering the distance between combatants in a blur of enhanced motion. Its first attack should have ended the fight immediately, a strike calculated to disable Webb's nervous system without causing fatal damage, preserving him for later study and assimilation. Webb wasn't there when the attack arrived. The human had moved in a way that the Apex Warrior's predictive algorithms couldn't account for. Instead of trying to match its speed or counter its technological advantages, Webb had done something that no rational combatant would attempt. He had deliberately put himself in a more dangerous position, using the arena's zero-gravity environment to redirect the Apex Warrior's momentum against itself. The enhanced warrior crashed into the arena wall with enough force to crack the quantum-hardened metal, its perfect reflexes useless because it had been programmed to expect logical, self-preserving behavior from its opponents. "Impossible!" breathed the Convergence commander through the observation speakers. "The human's actions are tactically unsound. Its behavior pattern suggests suicidal tendencies." Webb's voice came through his suit's communication system, calm and conversational. "Not suicidal, adaptive. See, the thing about coming from a death world is that you learn early on that the safe move isn't always the right move." The Apex Warrior recovered quickly, its enhanced systems already adapting to Webb's unconventional tactics. But adaptation was a two-way street, and Webb had been adapting to hostile environments his entire life. What followed wasn't a fight in any traditional sense, it was a demonstration of two completely different approaches to survival. The Apex Warrior fought with perfect technique, utilizing its enhanced capabilities and advanced weapon systems with mechanical precision. Every move was calculated for maximum efficiency, every attack designed to exploit the statistical weaknesses in human physiology. Webb fought like he had been raised by a world that was actively trying to kill him, which was exactly what had happened. His movements were chaotic, unpredictable, and seemingly desperate. He used the arena's environment in ways its designers had never intended, turning safety features into weapons, and using the Apex Warrior's technological superiority against itself.
He's not trying to defeat the Apex Warrior, Lieutenant Colonel Park observed from the bridge of the Gentle Current, where she was monitoring the combat through multiple sensor arrays. He's trying to teach it something.
Teach it what?
Zethar asked.
That there are some problems technology can't solve. The Apex Warrior's quantum processors were working at maximum capacity, trying to analyze and predict Webb's behavior patterns. But human behavior wasn't based on logical algorithms. It was based on intuition, experience, and the kind of desperate creativity that only came from surviving on a world where everything was a potential threat. Webb feinted toward the Apex Warrior's left side, then suddenly reversed direction and used his suit's minimal propulsion system to launch himself directly at what appeared to be the warrior's strongest point, its reinforced torso section. Any rational combatant would have avoided such a suicidal attack. Webb wasn't rational. He was human. Instead of trying to penetrate the Apex Warrior's armor, Webb grabbed onto it and used his momentum to spin both of them toward one of the arena's power conduits. The Apex Warrior's enhanced systems immediately calculated the trajectory and began compensating. But Webb did something that no tactical computer would ever recommend. He released his grip at exactly the wrong moment. Both combatants slammed into the arena wall, but Webb's seemingly foolish timing meant that the Apex Warrior absorbed the full impact while Webb bounced away relatively unharmed. More importantly, the collision had damaged one of the arena's quantum stabilizers, introducing an element of environmental chaos that the Apex Warrior's predictive systems couldn't account for. The human is deliberately destabilizing the combat environment, the Convergence commander observed, its voice showing something that might have been confusion. This reduces the survivability odds for both combatants.
The behavior is irrational. Webb's reply came through labored breathing as he maneuvered around a section of arena wall that was now sparking with unstable energy.
Irrational to you, maybe, but sometimes irrational is exactly what the situation calls for. The Apex Warrior was adapting its quantum processors, updating its behavioral models to account for Webb's unpredictable tactics. But adaptation was a process that took time, even for enhanced systems, and Webb wasn't giving it time to complete the process. Every time the Apex Warrior began to predict his movements, Webb would do something that made no tactical sense, exposing himself to danger to create opportunities, sacrificing defensive positioning for offensive possibilities, treating the entire combat arena like just another day on Earth where everything was trying to kill him. The fight continued for what seemed like hours but was actually less than 20 minutes. The Apex Warrior was still physically superior, its weapons more advanced, its systems more sophisticated. But it was fighting an enemy that refused to behave according to any logical parameters. Webb was bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, his basic life support system was showing multiple failures, and his primitive weapons were no match for the Apex Warrior's quantum-enhanced arsenal. By any rational measure, he should have been defeated within the first few minutes of combat. Instead, he was winning. Not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through something the Convergence had forgotten in their pursuit of technological perfection, the ability to find solutions that didn't exist in any database, to adapt in ways that no algorithm could predict, to keep fighting when logic said surrender was the only rational option. The end came suddenly. The Apex Warrior, its systems overloaded from trying to counter Webb's chaotic tactics, made a critical error. It tried to use the arena's damaged quantum stabilizers as a weapon, channeling energy through the compromised system to create a localized reality distortion that would have torn Webb apart at the molecular level. Webb had been expecting something like this. He'd been deliberately damaging the arena's systems throughout the fight, not to give himself an advantage, but to create exactly this opportunity. As the Apex Warrior activated the quantum weapon, Webb used his suit's emergency beacon, the same type of device his team had used to escape the enemy ship at Kepler Station, to create a localized electromagnetic pulse. The pulse was insignificant compared to the quantum energies in the arena, but it hit the damaged stabilizers at exactly the right moment. The quantum weapon turned on its wielder. The Apex Warrior simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased from reality, as the quantum field it had tried to weaponize collapsed into itself. Webb was thrown across the arena by the resulting energy release, but he was still there when the distortion cleared. He had won. The silence in the arena was absolute. Hundreds of Convergence warriors stared at the impossible sight of their perfect champion, defeated by a primitive from a death world. Their technological superiority, their quantum enhancements, their strategic perfection, none of it had been enough against an enemy who refused to accept the limitations of logic. The Convergence commander appeared in the arena via holographic projection,
its form flickering with what might have been uncertainty.
Human, you have achieved victory through methods our analysis cannot fully comprehend. By the terms of our agreement, we will withdraw from this system.
Webb struggled to his feet, his movements showing the cost of the battle. That's not enough. Explain. Webb looked directly at the Convergence commander, his eyes holding the same intensity that had frightened civilized species throughout the galaxy.
I want you to go back to your superiors and tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them that you sent your perfect warrior against a human, and the human won. To what purpose? Because somewhere in your fleet, in your command structure, in your perfect technological civilization, there are people who remember what it was like before you chose domination over cooperation. Tell them that there's another way.
The Convergence commander was silent for several seconds. You believe that knowledge of your victory will cause dissent within our ranks? I think, Webb said carefully, that perfection is brittle, and sometimes all it takes to shatter something brittle is one small crack in the right place. As Webb was transported back to the gentle current, the Convergence fleet began its withdrawal from the system. But something had changed in their formation, their movement patterns. Instead of the perfect coordination they had displayed earlier, there were subtle variations, small deviations from optimal efficiency. The crack had been planted. On the bridge of the gentle current, the crew watched in amazement as the most powerful enemy fleet they had ever encountered retreated from a single human's victory. But Webb wasn't celebrating. Colonel, Captain Zethara asked, what happens now? Webb slumped into a chair, exhaustion finally showing on his face. Now we prepare. That was just the opening move. The real war is about to begin. But you won. You proved that humans can defeat their technology. I proved that one human could defeat one of their warriors under specific circumstances, Webb corrected. The Convergence has 10 million ships and billions of enhanced warriors. We're going to need a lot more than individual victories to stop them. Lieutenant Colonel Park was already analyzing the data they had gathered during the combat.
Colonel, the information we collected about their command structure, their technology, their psychological profiles, it's more than we had hoped for. Enough to develop a strategy? Enough to develop several strategies? But we're going to need help. A lot of help. Webb nodded slowly. Then we better get started. Because if I know the Convergence, they're not going to make the mistake of underestimating humans twice. As the gentle current set course for Federation space, its crew carried with them the knowledge that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of warfare, technology, and the price of survival. They had learnt that the most advanced weapons could be defeated by the most primitive tactics, that perfect technology was vulnerable to imperfect innovation, and that sometimes the species everyone else considered primitive savages were the ones who saved civilization. The war against the Convergence was just beginning, but now the Federation had something it hadn't possessed before: hope. And they had learned something about the humans from the Deathworld that would change everything. When you back a human into a corner, when you threaten something they've decided to protect, they don't just fight back. They find a way to win no matter how impossible the odds might seem. And sometimes, just sometimes, they remind the entire universe that survival isn't about having the best technology or the most perfect strategies. Sometimes, survival is about being too stubborn to know when you're supposed to give up.